So Stuart, could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Yep, my name is Stuart Hazeldean and I'm a British-based screenwriter doing most of my work over in Hollywood for the studios, mostly features but some TV. So I am travelling on planes a lot and mainly working in genres of science fiction and fantasy, thriller, action, the kind of thing that 16 to 25-year-old guys form the core audience for.
And how did you get to this position? Presumably you didn't just fly up to Hollywood and say, look at me.
This exalted position. Well, I decided at university I wanted to write and direct films, and that writing was the best way in for learning the craft. It's really learning how to build the foundations of a building. So I just started writing in my spare time, and very fortunately for me, the first spec script that I wrote ended up selling, and I did have to work to sell it, and I did have to sort of beat the streets of Soho and be a bit of a salesman as well as a writer. And I just, at the time in 1995, everything was in Hollywood was Die Hard in a bus, Die Hard on this, and I'd always wanted to see a kind of an action movie on the London Underground, which, you know, at the time there were no Islamist bombs going off, and it seemed more of a fantasy. So I wrote Die Hard on the London Underground and just called it Underground. And I didn't think about the British film industry, I didn't think about budget or any of that. I literally just wrote the kind of movie I wanted to see. I wanted to see a big, expensive, slick, American-style action movie set in London with the reign of Piccadilly Circus and the neon lights, and that's what I wrote. And I found a couple of London-based young producers who looked like they wanted to make similar kind of films and were headed to Hollywood. Jeremy Bolt, who'd just made Shopping, and Paul Tribetz, who had just made The Young Americans, and I thought maybe I could ride on their coattails into LA. And they bought the script and got me an agent in the UK, and I ended up getting a trip over to America to work on a draft of the script while Jeremy was working there. And it was a slow infiltration of the system by degrees, getting to meet a few agents, learning what they're looking for, reading the trades, and generating as many spec scripts and ideas as I could, so that the next time I went back out there I had a number of scripts under my arm. I think if you go out there with just one, you're in a very vulnerable position. You can still succeed, but when I went out there on my second trip to really take a bunch of meetings, I had almost 8 spec scripts. I had a couple of sci-fis, a couple of action things, and I built them up over 2 or 3 years, and my agents liked having that much product. They could send the sci-fi scripts to the sci-fi producers, and they could give me 4 times the number of meetings. So I kind of took the sort of shock and awe approach, and fortunately it paid off. And so 2 years later I signed up with an American agent who Jeremy Bolt put me in touch with on my second or third trip out there, and suddenly I was represented. And as long as you go out fairly regularly, if you go out a couple of times of the year, I try and go out in the spring and the autumn, 5 or 6 weeks each time, so you've got a chance to have a bunch of meetings and take the books and the comic strips they give you that they want adapted and read them and come up with takes and go back and meet them. It takes about a month to do that. Then you can live in the UK as long as you can afford to go. So I would just budget from the money I was earning. I would set aside £1,000 to £1,500 for each trip for plane, car hire, stay on friends' floors and all that kind of stuff. And that was the way that I sort of set myself up to get into Hollywood but still be here.
And from your vantage point, obviously they are very different, but what does Los Angeles bring you as a writer that you couldn't get in London?
Well, obviously there's the simple side of it that they pay more, but it's not simply more money, it's more opportunity, it's bigger budgets for the movies themselves. I think crucially there's a different attitude that American producers and studio executives has. That they're an even purer meritocracy than we are in the UK. We are more of that now because of the Thatcherite revolution and the Blairites, but we still have the sort of old apprenticeship idea that you have to sort of earn your spurs and do your time making coffee or whatever it may be. So I think there are sort of invisible barriers that are a little bit more uncomfortable about you breaking in quickly when you're young in the UK. And I had a feeling that if I could go out to the US and they saw my stuff, that they might respond to it quicker and in a more confident way. And that was exactly what happened. Over here, they were sort of like, yes, you're very interesting. What are you working on next? Whereas out there, they'd be like, I love your script, here's some books. Do you have any ideas? Because if you do, you've got a job. And so I knew that I would get into the industry faster out there, and that's exactly what happened.
And what type of work are you engaged in at the moment? Your session was about rewriting.
Yeah. At the moment, I am sort of about 3 different projects on the go. I've just finished working on a Fox remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still, a classic sci-fi, which has been really interesting to work on. And I'm involved with an adaptation of Milton's Paradise Lost for Warner Brothers, which is a huge Lord of the Rings meets the Book of Genesis epic, and I hope to be working on that again very soon if that moves forward. And I'm about to start adapting the Tripods trilogy for Paramount Pictures with Alex Proyas, the director of iRobot and Dark City. I worked with him 3 times, and so this is our 4th collaboration, and we're going to co-write the first book together. A bunch of writers have been on it before. It's been grumbling away at Disney for a long time, and now Paramount have got it. We're hoping that it's going to move forward. And you know, it's a great British sci-fi. It used to be BBC TV Saturday tea time adaptation in the 80s when I was a kid, and now it's the big screen version. So we're going to do that.
And finally, and briefly, for a young writer, go to Hollywood, a good thing or not?
Oh, I definitely think it's a good thing. You just need to be very intentional about everything you do and really plan it and sort of look at your career as almost like a war. You know, you have to plan it as you would plan a military campaign, to go out there and to really build as many relationships as you can. Talent on its own is not enough. It's a self-starting job just to get up and write in the morning, and it's a self-starting job to sell your scripts once you've got something in your hand as well.
Thank you very much.